The second skill that we learned in Module 14.1 was expressing decimals as rational numbers. So going backwards, you're given a decimal. We want to change that into a fraction or a ratio of two numbers with a numerator and a denominator. And so in this situation, you might be given a decimal like 8/10. And the best thing to say about this is you write it like you say it. Okay, that's my biggest hint. Write it like you say it. And in this case, 8/10 would be 8/10. And then I simplify it. Both of them can be divided by 2. And to simplify it, I end up with 4/5. And of course, you can get a more complicated problem where you might be given, let's say, 825 thousandths. Again, you're going to write it like you say it. So 825 thousandths. And of course, you can simplify this. What number can go into both? Well, I know that 25 can go into both. You might not know that. You might take it, down a little bit slower and keep on simplifying it over and over and over again until you get to two numbers that are simplified. But in this case, I know that 25 goes into both. And this would equal 33 over 40. And that would be my simplified answer. So that's changing the decimal into a rational number, or essentially taking a decimal, putting it into a fraction. Well, we got a little complicated here, and sometimes it's easy to write it like you say it in instances like this, but we ran into some problems where we had a repeated decimal, and you're like, how can you possibly write that as a ratio? It just seems impossible, right? A rational number can be repeated, so it can be done. And we went over this in class the other day, but I want to show you the steps on a video so you can watch it over and over again if you need to until you understand it. So let's say that we are given the number 37 hundredths repeated. I'm going to tell you that the answer to this right now is going to be 37/99. I'm going to tell you the answer, and I feel like it's important to work backwards from it so you know how the process works. But let's just take the stress off of you right now. It's going to equal 37/99. And how I figured that out, I'll show you the steps. But how did I know it was 99? Well, there's two digits that are repeated, and so that tells you how many nines you're going to have in your denominator. Let's work through the problem right now and show you. You will need to do this for your test. You will need to be able to understand it. But if you start with the answer right here and then show the steps, then you kind of are halfway there and it takes some pressure off of you. So let me show you how it's done. The first thing that you're going to do is you're going to say, let x equal 37 hundredths repeated. Okay? Just set up that part of the equation. We're going to set this up where x equals 37 hundredths repeated, and I'm going to say, okay, x equals 37 hundredths repeated. So anytime you see an x, that's what it equals. Now, I can't work with this as a repeated number, so I want to make this a whole number. How could I do that? Well, I'm going to have to multiply it times 100 because I want this decimal point to be moved over here so that I could have a whole number and a decimal. But if I do that to one side, multiply by 100, I have to do the same thing over here. So I'm going to multiply both sides times 100. So 100 times x is the same thing as 100 times 37 hundredths repeated. Does that make sense to you? So all I did was multiply both sides by 100. And the purpose behind it is to make sure I end up with this. On this side, I'm going to end up with 100x. And on this side, this is where I want it. I'm going to end up with 37 and 37 hundredths repeated, because this number goes on and 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 on, right? And so this, essentially, what I did, since this goes on and on and on, I just moved this over 2, so I got my whole number, and then the rest of it, it's still going to be 37 repeated, okay? So this is what I end up with. So I end up with 100x equals 37 and 37 hundredths repeated, okay? Now, I want to get rid of this right here. I want to get rid of that repeated number because I can't do anything with it. I just need to work with a whole number. So I need to get rid of that. Well, I know up here that x equals the 3700ths repeated. So I could subtract an x over here, and I could subtract an x over here because I'm doing it to the same side. But in this case, I'm not going to write the x. I'm going to write subtract 3700ths because they equal each other. Because they equal each other up here, I can subtract it down here, and it's still balancing the equation. So over here, remember this is the same thing as 1x. So I have 100 x's, and I'm going to subtract one of those x's. So I end up with 99x over here. And over here, I subtracted this, and so I'm just left with 37. Now, my goal now is to find out what x equals, because we wanted to know what it equaled up here as a fraction. So in order to get rid of, or get the x isolated by itself, I've got to divide by 99 over here, and I've got to divide by 99 over here. And that means these guys cancel out, and x we're left with equals 37 over 99. And so that's how you get the answer at the top. I'm going to show you one more problem with it, not explain it so much along the way so that you can just kind of get the process done, okay? So you can make this up with any number. Let's go ahead and give you, let's do 729 thousandths repeated, okay? So I'm going to tell you the answer. Think about the answer right off the bat. I told you how many numbers down here you have, however many numbers you have repeated, is going to be how many nines you have in your denominator for your answer. So my end result is going to be 729 over 999. That's going to be my final answer, okay? So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say x equals 729 thousandths repeated. Just set up that equation. You just have to start there. My next goal is to get all these digits to be on a whole number. So what do you think I'm going to have to multiply by in order to get these three numbers as a whole number? Yep, 1,000. So I'm going to multiply this times 1,000 and this times 1,000. I end up with 1,000x equals 729 whole number and 729 repeated. Now, I said that x equals that, equals 729 thousandths repeated. So now I want to get rid of this. I just want a whole number here. So in order to do that, I'm going to have to subtract this, which is the same thing as 1x, right? So I'm going to subtract 1x over here, or just x. I'm putting the 1x there so you see that I'm just taking away one of those x's, but typically you won't see that. You'll just see minus x, okay? Equals, or on this side, I'm going to subtract, on this side, I'm going to subtract 729 repeated. They're the same thing, right? Okay, see how they equal each other up here? So I'm going to subtract the x over here, and I end up with 999x. And over here, I subtracted the repeating 729 thousandths, so I'm left with 729. And now I need to get the x isolated, get the x by itself. So I divide by 999 on this side. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. These guys cancel out, and they equal 1. I end up with x equals 729 over 999. I'm going to do one last one. You go ahead and you can pause the video after I give you the problem so that you can try it on your own, and then you can check your work with what I give you, okay? So let's do something like 8/10ths repeated, okay? What is that going to equal? Pause your video, go through the steps, and then listen as I explain it. Okay, I hope you had time to try this one out on your own. My first thought is that it's going to be 8/9. That's going to be my final answer because there's one digit that's being repeated, and I told you that there's going to be, that tells you how many nines you're going to have in your denominator, okay? So I'm going to set up the equation where x equals 8/10 repeated. In order to get this number to be a whole number by itself, I'm going to have to do what to both sides? I need to multiply it by 10. So over here, I'm going to multiply 10 times x, and over here, I'm going to do 0.8 repeated times 10, and I end up with 10x equals 8 repeated. Now my job is to get rid of this. Okay, so in order to do that, I've got to do it to the same, to both sides. So I'm going to subtract an x over here, and I'm going to subtract the 8/10 repeated over here. It's the same thing because they equal each other up here. So I'm left with 9x on this side. It's the same thing as 8 over here. I subtract that, I'm left with the whole number 8. And in order to get the x, find out what x equals, I've got to divide by 9 and divide by 9. So x equals 8/9 is my final answer. Hard for you to see down there, but x equals 8/9 by the end of it because these two become 1, so you're left with 1x is the same thing as 8/9. If you are still having trouble with this, make sure that you talk to a friend, talk to me in a small group, but hopefully you're better understanding it after those. There's a couple problems in your book that you can practice with as well.